Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back down the rabbit hole. My name is Monty Hook, and after 1 year long hiatus, we are back in the studio for the rabbit hole. And today, I'm joined by Mr. Ronnie Landis. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing amazing.
Good. Welcome
so happy to be here.
Thank you. Welcome to Lighthouse.
Thank you.
So, just to give everybody some context, we're here in Studio 3 at Lighthouse Studios in Bali, and this is the first podcast I've recorded in my own studios.
Yeah.
Before this, we had a beta studio in my villa, and we recorded a lot of episodes in there. And it's really interesting to be back in the studio. And now at Lighthouse, we're fully open. We're good to go. What do you think of Lighthouse?
Well, I think it's amazing what you've done with this place. It's like extraordinary. I've actually never seen anything like it.
Awesome. You're a podcaster as well, right?
Yeah. I have a podcast. I've been doing a podcasting for like 7 years, and I've never really done it in a professional studio. I've been in professional studios on other people's podcasts, but I've never seen a co-working space that's also combined as a studio space. And this is a really special place. So
Cool.
I'm excited to be here.
Well, as much as I'd love to talk about me and Lighthouse, let's make this about you. You're the guest here. So we were connected by a mutual friend, Chris Dufay, and I just had a bit of a squiz around your website last night and your Instagram, and I downloaded this, and we'll talk about that. This is your life optimization map or something.
Yeah.
But you saying online, this is what it says. Ronnie Landis is a leading expert in holistic health, natural nutrition, and human potential. He powerfully supports driven entrepreneurs, athletes, performers, executives, and influencers to perform at their best mentally, emotionally, and physically. And then a little line that kind of captures my attention is exploring the fringes of cutting-edge health sciences and food-based nutrition, which I think we'll go into a fair bit of depth about. Like that's something I'm constantly curious about. It seems like, theories and theories change every 5 minutes, and the science changes all the time.
Yeah.
But I think that there's a lot of people now learning about, the fundamentals of, the way nature intended and the way that we actually are, rather than pushing medical agendas on us.
Yes.
So you seem to be somebody who's pretty well tapped into all of that. And I'm assuming you're looking at all these different aspects, including, the emotional and the spiritual and all these things and how it all weaves together. And I'm assuming you've got your own story about how you came to be talking about this stuff. And addiction is one of the things you talk about as well.
Yep.
So just give us a little bit of a snapshot, the backstory into who is Ronnie.
Yeah, I'll I'll make it short just because we have so much to cover, and it's like, what's your story? And we go through this and podcast so much. But it is interesting because I was raised as a martial artist from the age of 4. So that's my original pedigree as an athlete and a martial artist. And I was training as Olympic hopeful from the age of 16 into 23. I was actually training to make the U.S. national team.
In what?
In Taekwondo.
Taekwondo.
Yeah, I competed in the U.S. Open, I think in 2006 or 7, and then competed internationally and was making my way there. There was some, let's just say, conflicts in my life path that arose that I made a choice point and changed direction. But I was running a martial arts school at the same time. So very committed martial artist, elite athlete, played basketball all my life. So I was a double sport athlete. And that's my background. And so I got into the health thing because I had a knee injury when I was 18, just overtraining and just wear and tear on my meniscus and tore a piece of my MCL, and then ended up going through the whole surgical route and just going through that whole drama, really, because that was the first time that I had been physically sidelined. And so my dream that really kept me on the straight and narrow was now being challenged. And I couldn't see anything else outside of that in my life. That was the only thing that made any sense to me. The only thing I was going to do with my life. Growing up in the compulsory, repetitive, academic, industrialized schooling system, that was not exactly my forte. I was not unintelligent. I was just very bored. And I think I always knew that this was not relevant. I just didn't really seem to care. So that path wasn't really that wasn't going to be a viable thing for me. I knew that martial arts at the time was the thing that just called me forward. So anyways, I had a long series of just recovering from that knee injury, which then introduced me into the alternative healing world, studying repairing the body therapeutically, through movement practices and things of that nature. And then eventually I actually worked in a hospital in the emergency room for 3 years, which was just kind of a weird synchronicity because it wasn't like a career path. I just kind of ended up taking a job to supplement my athletic career, as an HIV tester in Oakland, California. So major hospital, I'm in the emergency room, I'm doing HIV swab tests, and I'm all of a sudden I'm kind of becoming a double agent. This is where my first spiritual awakening started to happen. I stumbled on YouTube University, and I started stumbling on different people like Paul Chek and David Wolf and different characters in the health world that completely shifted my paradigm, like completely turned it upside down. And I happened to be in the medical environment at the same time. Yeah. So it's interesting, like how God works.
You're obviously shown that so you could see the complete contrasts, right?
Exactly. Yeah. That's exactly right. So what ended up happening is that I basically became like a double agent. So by day, I would be doing these HIV testing, these swabs, working in the medical establishment, and I would be observing what's going on in the meetings with the pharmaceutical reps that are coming in and selling their new pharmaceutical for the new STD, the new HIV pharmaceutical, and I would listen to the sales pitches. And it just became very obvious that something was like really strange, just like in the vibration or just the way the whole thing was going down. I didn't really know so much. It took me a number of years to really awaken to the truth. Like now I know without any doubt what goes on in that world and how just absolutely corrupted that entire world is. I could go on, but basically what ended up happening is I got into the raw food world. I started juicing. I started doing like spirulina, cacao, coconut water, goji berry smoothies. I had my own office, so I'd be going in there. I'd have a backpack full of superfoods. I'd have a blender, like a little magic bullet blender. And I'd go into my office. I'd have these swab tests. They're like 20 minutes. So every 20 minutes, I'd be waiting on swabs to tell me the results of patients, that they have HIV or not, which that's a whole other thing to talk about, right? I had to actually tell people this too. I had to actually give people the results.
That's heavy.
That was heavy. But so like I would be whipping up all these superfood smoothies. I'd be on YouTube studying voraciously, going down the pharmaceutical rabbit hole, going down the vaccine rabbit hole, going down the genetically modified agricultural rabbit hole, going down the nutritional dietary theory rabbit hole. Like I'm doing all this behind the scenes, and then I walk out and I go into the emergency room with the doctors and the nurses and watching them eating out of vending machines, and I'm having a complete the veil is dropping very quickly. Right, so that's just that's just a little bit of how I came to be in the holistic health world.
Yeah, no, that's interesting that you got to see those complete contrasts.
Because most people don't actually see it.
Well, I mean, it's to somebody like I've always been a little bit weird. I've always probably since a young age seen things or understood things that maybe other people don't understand. And it's been a gift and it's been a curse at the same time because a lot of my life never fitted in, right? But it absolutely baffles me that people see a hospital cafeteria and what they're selling in the hospital cafeteria, which even anybody who consumes junk food could just look at that and put two and two together and go, that's junk food. Mm-hmm. I'm here supposedly trying to get well.
Right.
Like, how does that not occur to more people? Like, it seems like we are so brainwashed that to me it's just mind-boggling.
It is mind-boggling. It makes no logical sense. And my only explanation is that people are so desensitized and they become so numbed out literally through being medicated, and the food itself is a sedative.
Yeah.
So that's another thing with like this processed food, overly cooked food, factory farm food, whatever you want to say, this Franken food, it's actually a sedative to medicate people's consciousness and to desensitize them from the sensations of their body.
Yeah.
So they actually can't feel their body. And if somebody doesn't have the ability to sense or to be sensitive, then they won't be able to make sensible decisions with their life.
They can't be attuned to what they actually need. This
That's right.
is something that I've had my own experience with. You've had your own journey. You were talking about juicing and all this. I had an experience about 10 years ago where I was getting a lot of parasites and a lot of issues, and I was always reasonably healthy. But I started doing a lot of fasting and a lot of juicing, cleaned a lot of stuff out of my body. And the more that I did that, after a few years, I feel like I became very attuned to what my body needs. So now I know that I can feel when, okay, I should only drink one coffee today, or I only need to eat vegan food for the next 2 days, or I need to do a water fast for 3 days. Like my body tells me. And had I have not gone through that process of elimination, like eliminating everything out, and I think this is one of the issues with diets, right? That people go from one lifestyle to another lifestyle, which is another form of extreme diet.
Hopping around.
It's the break. It's like I think it's the elimination part of it,
totally,
which resets you and gives you that ability to attune. Is that
I fully agree. And there was this running joke for so many years in kind of like our nutritional communities where the word diet has the word die in it. So that's actually a really important thing for people to take a hold of, like the grammatical like interpretation of word and the frequency of words. Like nobody wants to diet. People want to live it. So that's actually a key thing. I was thinking about this earlier today, weirdly enough. So when people are hopping around to this diet, that diet, the ABC diet, the acronym diets, like everything is just reconfigured into some different alphabetical, like dietary, rebranded kind of thing. But there's only a certain amount of actual nutritional approaches that anybody can actually do. They just get reconfigured into something else for the next flavor of the month. Really the most important thing is that somebody gets off diet consciousness, and whatever they choose to do, they actually live it.
Yeah.
They actually commit fully to the lifestyle. And then the nutritional part is really just an organization of food supplement options that are going to help fuel your body so you can do what you need to do, so that you're energized, you have the mental and emotional and physical energy to do whatever it is that you need to do. You have a purpose and you have a mission of some sort, even if your mission is just to feel better. It's just to get healthier. It's just to get into the gym. It's to build a business, to have a family, whatever it is. Somebody needs to have an actual purpose. And then what's interesting about that is then the dietary aspect no longer becomes kind of like a religion or a main focus. Then it just becomes this supportive cast, and people don't focus so much on the food. The food is just something you do to fuel you for whatever it is that your mission is.
I also think you've only got so much bandwidth in terms of where your focus goes to, to create a good life. So when it just becomes your lifestyle, and then you're no longer thinking about it. It's like, this is just the way that I live. When you're on a diet and you're inside some kind of regime, it's like that's what you're thinking about all of the time, and that takes up a lot of energy. It takes up a lot of bandwidth, which is then not giving you access to creating something bigger. It might, people might get results, short term in that, but that's not the goal.
Sure.
That's not the goal.
That's right.
Yeah. So I want to come back to the nutrition part of it, but I want to see if we can just go down the rabbit hole a little bit straight off the bat. You're talking about, the broken system, the broken establishment. how much of that do you think is actually on purpose, or do you think it's just one problem stacked on top, for 100 years, problem after problem after problem, and there's no real effort or no real intention behind that? Or do you actually think there's intention behind the sickness?
It's 100% deliberate.
I knew the answer.
It's 100% deliberate. And I can say that with absolute certainty because of how much I've sussed out the control structures. If you really want to go down the rabbit hole of like the 13 bloodline families and the Caesarian mafia and the Luciferian cults and all the things that exist below
this is a great first episode
below the radar of these institutions that oppose freedom, like these government alphabet agencies, the medical institutions, these agricultural companies, all the things.
You know what's crazy? I agree. I think the reason why it's so hard for people to grasp is because it's so big, and it's the reason it's so big is because it's been happening for a long time.
Yeah.
Since post World War II, there's all these things, these organizations, the acronyms, the United Nations and the World Economic Forum and all these things, like people can come to their own conclusions, but these things have been established and then they've been believed for a long time, and it's just now so embedded for so many decades.
Yeah.
And then when people like you and I start talking about it, people go, no, that can't. It's too big to comprehend.
That's right.
It's just too big.
It is. It is too big to comprehend, and it becomes a full-time job just to try to unwind it. And I don't even really recommend most people even attempt to. I had to go through some deep unwinding psychologically with psychedelic assisted psychotherapy to even be able to unwind the layers of cognitive dissonance, the programming, and then to even be able to go into it. Actually took me a number of ayahuasca ceremonies to touch the heart of darkness, to really go into how deep this really was. And then interestingly enough, through that medicine, it actually helped to heal me from that. And I didn't actually have the desire to go back down the rabbit hole, but I was in that rabbit hole for, definitely since 2020, a year and a half straight, on and off. It basically became my like full-time gig. I thought I was going to become like a freedom fighter. I was like, are you going to become John Connor now? Like, no, you're not a nutritionist anymore. You're not a trauma expert anymore. I mean, I guess you kind of are, because you're going down the deepest rabbit hole of like collective trauma that exists. But I kind of put everything to the side to go down this like what felt like a holy mission. And I'll tell you too, what came out of that for me when I realized that evil is absolutely real. I'm staring it in the face. It's staring right back at me. Lucifer is absolutely a real being of some sort of interdimensional being, absolutely real. That also means that Jesus must be real too. God actually has to be real now. And it was interesting. There seemed to be this revival of like Jesus and God, where before I think it just got to a point of what we call like scientism, where like science and materialism and atheism has become like this materialistic replacement for God, because most people get spirituality or quote unquote God mixed up with religion.
Yeah, and I think it doesn't matter which way what your beliefs are around spirituality or God, or however you perceive it.
Yeah.
But I've said this many times. I think all of the problems that are happening in the world right now, you can put down to godlessness. Like however you view that, godlessness.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we straight down the rabbit hole. So look, we could probably have a couple of episodes on all this stuff, but let's not go too far.
I'm refraining quite a bit just to give space for anything else we want to talk about.
But you did mention the ayahuasca journeys. That's been a big part of my experience as well. I've done stuff over in Peru and massive awakenings, and I think it's not that those journeys instantly like give you something. It's something that you become more aware, you become more awakened to yourself, and then I think it just gives you a greater access to navigate. Like you were saying before, that you kind of went on this mission of you went deep down that rabbit hole, and now you've kind of gone back onto your path, which is just talking about nutrition, etc. And I think this is a tricky one because there is this conversation around freedom, and a lot of people do go to that extreme.
Yeah.
And I think that in itself also is unhelpful,
Yeah.
because people they just like the extremes of one end, right?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I don't think that is the access to awakening more people. I think it's just through living your life in a conscious way and living in a awakening yourself to intuition and becoming spiritual in whatever regard that is to you. And I think the more people just do that, the more we can move the needle. So
agreed.
Where do you think, this is a big question, but where do you think humanity is at with that? I kind of wonder if we have reached a tipping point in the fucking weirdness, and now there's more people waking up and we're starting to move back in that direction. I 100% believe that there is no answer for humanity other than to go in that direction. Like we have
Agreed.
we have to. Even to me, it would be better that we all went and lived in the jungles, right, and just started from scratch than, going completely in the other extremes where we just blow ourselves up, right? Do you think that? Well, two parts to the question. One is, do you think that we are at some kind of tipping point, or do you think we've still got a long way to go? And do you think it's possible for us to combine, technology and science and this way of living and relating to each other, where we can thrive as a species?
Okay, this is like, that was a perfectly framed question, and I think I have a really good kind of framework to respond to that. First of all, we are at the critical tipping point of all tipping points in the entire eonic history of this planet. I'll just say it that way. Like, everything that's ever happened in this world, this realm, is reliant on what we do now as a collective. And so we are at a critical tipping point. I think one of the things that's important to recognize is that it's not on our shoulders as fallible human beings. Whether you take the more of a Christian perspective or whatever particular religious perspective or a spiritual perspective, I think what's really coming through is this thing around faith in a higher power that has certain principles and values and virtues that we as human beings aspire to embody and build into our character set, but it's not actually on us to do. Like, I do believe in angels at this point. I believe in angels. I believe in guardians and guides and interdimensional beings, and I believe in all that. I don't know all the ins and outs of it. I've studied and gone down all kinds of rabbit holes. I know in my own life there have been magic and miracles in strange synchronicities that have shown up that have also reflected to me how important my attitude is in any given moment. Especially being here in Bali, when you're in like an amplified vortex, you realize that your energetic, your attitude, your thought process, and where your emotional state is has a particular effect on the environment and how the environment responds back to you. So that's the first thing, is that in each of our individual lives, we have to take control of our attitude. I think it was Viktor Frankl in the book Man's Search for Meaning, right? One of the most classic books of all time. And his most famous phrase in that book was that the last of the great human freedoms is in the ability to control one's attitude in any situation. So I think that if we're going to talk about even like God and faith and all that, to me, that is the greatest act of faith, is I'm going to take control of my attitude and I'm going to own it and work on myself to be the best human I can be. And then I'm going to let go of the things that I can't control, because I know there's a bigger chessboard here and I can only do what I can do. So that's one thing Now, the other thing that's coming through to your other question, I don't know if you're familiar with a mystic called Rudolf Steiner.
I have heard.
Okay.
I've heard snippets, but yeah, remind me. Yeah.
So Rudolf Steiner was one of the greatest mystics, definitely of the last 100 or 200 years. And he was a visionary and a prophet, really. And so he foretold of a lot of things that are playing out now. One of the frameworks that he had that people are actually talking about a lot now about the times that we're in are these two different forces of what we would call evil, which do exist inside of us, which is the Ahrimanic force and the Luciferian force. So I'll just kind of break this down simply. So the Ahrimanic force is the force of materialism. So what we would call scientism, where everything is densified, it's material, it's matter. It's essentially stripping God or stripping spirit from matter. So it's all just like cybernetic.
Yeah.
It's like, so we're in the cybernetic age versus the cardiozoic age, which is the age of the heart. So there's the toggle or the struggle between the head and the heart.
Yeah.
And so Ahriman,
which is almost like the over understanding.
Yeah, over analyzing,
Yeah.
rationalizing, logic
versus just being.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because when you're being,
And allowing.
you're able to feel and sense. And that's the whole thing with meditation. Meditation is essentially just a feeling exercise, right? And doing breath work and that kind of thing. So the Ahrimanic force is a force towards hypergravitation. So like the gravitational pull in our atmosphere is trying to calcify and densify all of life so that there's no actual life force left. And it's an interesting little rabbit hole that I'll leave on that, how deep that particular thing goes. But you could see how that's playing out.
Yeah.
The whole like materialistic, atheistic medical model is all based on the Ahrimanic philosophy. Bill Gates and blocking out the sun and the whole vaccine agenda and all that, right? That's basically an Ahrimanic philosophy. And then you have the Luciferic force, right? Which is equally interesting, because then we look at like the spiritual culture and particularly the New Age culture and the hyper fantasizing. So where one is very like grounded to the point where it's too grounded,
Yep.
the other is very ethereal where it's completely ungrounded, right? So it's all like fantasy based and mental projections and this kind of thing, and so what Rudolf Steiner talked about is that these two forces are two forces of the same coin, which is what we would call quote unquote evil or darkness. They're the adversarial force. And then they also have to do with the manifestation of what we call the Antichrist, which is like, that's something I actually spent a considerable amount of time trying to identify. And I actually, in one of my ayahuasca ceremonies, I asked the medicine what the deal with this was. I won't go into that now, but just if anybody's interested in that, it's something worth your investigation just as a spiritual pursuit, which is basically just the manifestation of all that opposes life, right? So that's what we're dealing with in this world. We're dealing with the beings that oppose life and sentience. And we as ennobled humans are trying to self-actualize that God spark, that like angelic quality in human form, and kind of this protective guardianship of life. And so these two forces, they exist inside of us. So the whole thing is not about repressing or avoiding them. It's actually about how do we integrate the Luciferic and the Ahrimanic forces to our benefit. And to your point before about not going to the extremes, because if you go too far down the Ahrimanic side, then your physical body can manifest Ahrimanic diseases. So like calcification, spinal stenosis, muscle atrophy, like arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, this kind of thing. Very brittle, calcified, like, we're basically, you're being gravitationally suppressed. And you can't function anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's super interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And the flip side of that is like the body being in flow, like the body being free, the body being able to move. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the Luciferian thing is like it's too much flow without any structure.
Yeah.
So it's hyper fantasizing. I'm thinking so many like new age type of concepts, and it's very conceptual. It's all conceptual based, but it's not necessarily practical or result driven. That's the extreme of it. Now you have to have both, right? You want to have your foot on the ground, grounded, but with your head in the stars, so to speak.
Yeah.
Like, so you're dreaming of the heavens, but your feet are on the ground.
Yeah.
That's where we want to be with that.
Yeah. So how does you and I are privileged in that we're exposed to a lot of these conversations, and
privileged in a sense, like depends on how you think about it, because it's a challenging endeavor. It's a challenging internal endeavor to like.
I feel privileged because I'd rather be around this.
100%. Yeah.
But how does people who are not exposed as much as we are start to integrate this into their existence? There might be people out there who feel or get a sense, they get a sense that this is not right. But the issue is the way society is structured is that people are so trapped, stuck in the matrix, and that needing to live day to day, week to week, month to month, look after their families, go to their job, pay off their car, pay off their house, all of that, it overrides everything. So how does I feel privileged that I don't live like that. You probably feel the same. How does somebody get themselves out of that? Because it's all well and good to say, awaken to these theories and philosophies, even though they might have a sense, they might have a knowing, they might have a feeling, but they also have responsibilities to their family.
Of course.
How do people maneuver?
I think it's a step-by-step process, and each person's journey is unique to them. So I can't tell anybody how they're going to do it. What I will say is that the first thing that you do is you change what you put in your mouth. Yeah. That's what happened for me. That's what I've seen happen for countless people. Nothing fundamentally changes until you change your health. Health sovereignty is the name of the game. That's the only thing that's real. If you have all the money in the world, you have all the material possessions, even you have great relationships, but your health is at a decline, everything else means nothing. Yeah, and also like you said before, until your body is in that somewhat more optimal state, it can't be. Your body is an instrument to tune into. That's right. To tune into the bigger picture. So if it's not in that state where it has the capacity to do that, it will not. That's right. And I mean, we can go really deep down into like just the practical whys of how this is important. It's just so obvious, but it's not so obvious when you're in the minutia and the muck of these things. Also because there's so much noise. There's so much noise. I've interviewed on the podcast, one week I interviewed somebody who was vegan, whole foods, and I'm learning from them. There's snippets of wisdom I can take from them. The very next week I interview somebody, actually it was the week before, somebody who's on full hardcore carnivore diet. Yeah. And there's things that they're saying is like, wow, that's really awesome too. There's snippets of wisdom. I get the feeling that both of them are right. Everybody's right. But it's, for me, it's taking the one thing I will always remind myself of is this what nature intended? Like this is called barley rain. Yes. It comes out of the sky, and okay, well, pretty sure that's natural, right? That's as natural. Now, the water that we buy in the 7-Eleven from Nestle, I don't think is natural. Yeah, that's right. So that to me seems to be the fundamental thing. But when it comes to what kind of should we be, what volume of meat and vegetables and grains, and is there an optimal way, or is it completely different for everybody? Is it different for different people based on where they're at in their journey? One of the big things for me is I
I stopped eating red meat about 5 years ago when I was going through that phase. It was the elimination of the red meat, which cleaned me out and gave me a reset. And then I think around 3 years ago, I came back to red meat because my body was telling me to.
Yeah.
And ever since I came back on that, now I feel like I'm consuming red meat in a way that is good for me. And I know how much to consume because my body tells me. So a lot of people would go off red meat and go, oh, well, you know, being vegetarian is the best thing that ever happened to me. And then that just becomes their mindset. I don't think it's that simple.
No, it's not. And I'd love to dive into that and also provide a simple framework for people to understand that. Everything is seasonal and cyclical. What I really recommend for people that are just getting into the nutrition thing is that they start exploring cleansing and detoxification practices. I don't think most people actually need to go towards paleo or towards carnivore first. What they need to do is clean out the body, because we've accumulated so much foreign debris and waste products in the form of heavy metals, pesticides, xenoestrogens, which are artificial estrogen mimicking chemicals that throw our hormones out of balance, especially as men. And you know, just all the food that we've consumed and overeaten, it all has developed impactions in our system. So we need to clean out and reset the body altogether first. That's where vegetarian diets, particularly raw food-based diets that are balanced, green vegetable juicing, you know, certain types of plant-based smoothies, and then getting towards more fresh produce, fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds that are sprouted and germinated, preferably, seaweeds, fermented foods, and then superfoods. So getting into that is great because it alkalizes the body, it hydrates the body, it informs the body on a new set of like information from your environment. And then from there, once you start to reset, then you can start to get into a place where you can rebuild the body. So we call this anabolism and catabolism, right? The anabolic phase is basically a phase of metabolism that's like breaking down, cleansing, clearing old material out. If we don't clear out the old material and we just add on new building blocks, then we're going to get constipated. And I've seen this a lot in like the keto and paleo communities, where you see a lot of people that are they're very kind of dense and they're energetic. They're like they're more harmonic. They're too grounded, and it's like caloric, what we call like caloric force, like a cow. It's like they're eating so much cow where they're just like their body just looks kind of like the CrossFit, you know, people. No offense, but
there's going to be a lot of people offended, but
that's okay.
I see what you mean.
Yeah, well, I'm speaking to a particular like energetic that I see in the diet world. Now, but on the other side, you go into the vegan world and you see a lot of people that are more like triathlons and more runners and that kind of thing. And a lot of people that are excessively skinny or thin, they can't really build very much muscle, and then they appear like they're wasting weight. Those are the extremes, right? Then we want to find the balance point in the middle. Ultimately, the balance point is an integration of both worlds. Yeah. Sometimes you're going to find that going more plant-based and lightening the load is good for a season, especially if you're in the summer months. Yep. And then maybe in the winter months, you might find that storing up bone broths, red meat, animal foods is going to be more nourishing for you. Yeah.
And if you want to kind of bring this back to nature, I don't think that humans, in terms of our bodies, have changed much in 2,000 years. And it's only been in the last 100 years that our food has dramatically changed. And if you think of what people used to eat, well, it would have been seasonal. They would have been eating certain kinds of foods in one season and then different foods in another season. And they were living according to nature. And I think, you know, this might be getting a bit airy-fairy and fluffy, but I think we were designed that way. Like we were
absolutely.
Like we were designed to be part of nature, and you know, to try to hack that and say, okay, well, I'm not going to eat that because this is, this thing in the other season is better for me.
Right.
It's like,
can I make a point about that?
Yeah.
So this, I'm glad you brought this up. So just to synthesize the principle of all this, first of all, we live in a time where never before have we been able to choose a dietary path. We've never been able to actually choose a diet or a nutrition program.
until 100 years ago, people were just trying to fucking live and
It was
survive.
all survival based. 100%.
Yeah.
So we get it's very strange for me when people are like talking about Paleolithic diets and caveman diets. It's like, and it's the little symbol on the gluten-free cookie or something. It's like, whoa, really? We're so detached from nature that this is where we are. It's all marketing.
Yeah.
So we need to extricate ourselves from that whole matrix. And ultimately, I've been saying this for years, the only dietary approaches that are going to work long-term are the ones that lead you back to nature. So then you can look at, like, for me, I was a raw vegan for 3.5 years, 100%. And then I was a vegetarian for 10 years. Where that led me was all over the world. I lived in Hawaii for years. I lived on a permaculture farm. Hundreds of rarefied exotic fruits and superfoods, and getting my hand in the soil, and like getting like deep with cacao, and like helping to grow cacao trees, and learning how to make like raw chocolate from the seed and go through the entire alchemical process of turning it into a raw chocolate bar.
Yeah.
Instead of just going to the store and getting a chocolate bar and saying, oh, that's cool. I actually was able to get intimate with the plants. That's a very different thing.
And I think if people did that, they would choose foods way more wisely.
That's right. Yeah, when I go to the grocery store, it's like, I mean, I barely ever do anymore because there's nothing for me. I don't know. I'm just looking around. I'm like, there's nothing to eat here.
So what's your day typical day look like in terms of food?
Sure. So nowadays, so in early 2020, I did receive the calling, as you did, to reintroduce red meat back into my diet. That's a whole story in of itself. It was a very shamanic experience. I had like a whole awakening around that too, and it was really powerful. So now I usually have maybe a steak a day, or maybe every other day kind of thing. It's a part of my staple. I actually don't eat that much compared to what I used to. I usually have like one, protein superfood smoothie after my weight workout. I drink a lot of water. Like, hydration is absolutely critical. I probably drink 2 to 3 young coconuts every single day, being here in Bali. And then what else? Like, and then I'm pretty lax. I'm pretty lax. Like, everything I eat is organic. It's as fresh as possible. And I don't skimp on that. But I don't really think about it as much. I'm in much more of a fluid flow, but I usually have at least one steak, if not 2 steaks a day, depending on my workout routine.
Yeah. So what's your exercise, workout, movement routine?
So right now I'm in a 90-day container that I created for myself. So my goal is to get a little bit bigger, is to get stronger. So actually not every day, but from Monday to Friday, 6:30 till 8 in the morning, I'm doing a really intense weight training circuit. So I basically create my own circuit of different exercises, and then I combine them on top of each other and do 5 rounds of those.
Yeah. You're doing this at the gym?
I'm doing it at the gym. Yeah.
And you're doing that fasted?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's another thing. So I always fast in the morning. I don't eat breakfast.
Yeah.
The closest thing to breakfast that I do is I have a smoothie after my workout.
Yeah.
If I don't do that, the only reason I'm doing that is because all of my supplements, I've run through all of my supplements that I brought over here from the States, and trying to get supplements here is a nightmare. So like, I had a whole boatload of all my like fermented amino acids and everything. If I had all that, I wouldn't be bothering with the smoothie.
Yeah.
But because I don't have all my favorite supplements, I'm throwing the smoothie in there.
Cool. So you're doing that 5 days a week. That seems pretty intense.
It is.
Yeah. So a lot of people would think the amount of calories that you're burning during that and what you're describing that you eat, they don't match up. Now that's according to if I Google my weight and how many calories I'm supposed to consume based on the exercise I do, it'll say 2,834 calories or whatever it is.
Sure.
Now, my experience is that I've been through times where I'm like, I'm pretty sure I'm not eating, not that I'm counting, I'm pretty sure I'm not eating more than 2,000 calories a day, and I'm not losing weight, I'm not gaining weight, I'm not anything. So I think I'm not an expert. I'm just going based on my assumption.
You have a sense about it.
I have a sense that my body maybe is more efficient than other people's. So I don't know where those calculators come from, but I have a sense that maybe my body is working differently to the average person of whom they generate those computations from. Does that sound fair?
Yeah, and I mean, when you get deep into like those quote unquote computation mechanics and the whole theory behind it, it really doesn't make a lot of sense. Just like calories in, calories out, that's not a correct assessment of how the human body works. When you get into the understanding of like mitochondrial cellular energy, and then also really when you learn about cleansing and detoxing, then it takes on a whole nother shape and form. Most people don't know anything about cleansing. This is not something we've ever been taught. So when you cleanse out the impurities of the body and you get cellular integrity, the ATP, otherwise known as the energy system of your cells, starts to perform much better. And you're able to generate energy without even eating.
Yeah.
So this is an interesting thing. Does food actually give us energy? And the answer is no. Food doesn't give us energy. In fact, the more food you eat, the less energy you have, because digestion requires the most amount of energy than anything.
It's like 50% of all your energy you consume from digestion, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So when you look at like, okay, macros, protein is not an energy source. So you don't want to be eating too much protein unless it's for recovery purposes. So the steak I eat is not to get energy. It's a recovery, building back the muscular tissue, the amino acids, etc., brain tissue, stabilizing my blood sugar, just rebuilding the structure of the body.
Yeah.
Fat and ketones and then glucose are the only two sources of energy from food, right? So that's important to know. If people want to get more energy, then you're going to be looking at either sugar or fat.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've always thought that 100%, like, breakfast, lunch, and dinner is a completely fabricated.
It's a scam. It's a total scam.
Yeah. I mean, I think the way that humans used to live hundreds of years ago is you would go out and hunt or, find food. You'd find a bunch of food and you would eat that and then you would eat nothing for 3 days.
Right. Are you familiar with Weston Price?
No.
Okay. Weston A. Price was a famous dentist who was the book Physical Health and Degeneration, something like that in the 1930s. His whole work is like foundational to the quote unquote Paleolithic movement. And basically what he discovered was, so he was a dentist and he went around the world studying the dental health of tribes, of different tribal peoples and indigenous cultures, because he noticed in the West with the advent of like sugar and white flour and white salt and all this kind of thing, that they had more cavities and just poor dental health. And he was also opposed to root canals. He was the very first dentist who spoke out against root canals. And so he noticed that in these indigenous tribes, they didn't have any issues of dental cavitations or they didn't use brushes, they didn't floss, they didn't do anything like that. And so what he basically found out is that they're eating a natural diet, right? Obviously. And all the different diets are varied. They all had some sort of meat or fish and different like wild vegetation of some sort. They were all drinking some sort of spring water or glacial waters. But his work is really groundbreaking for that kind of idea that you're bringing forth.
Yeah. Yeah. There's, I think, we've got such a long way to go before we can unravel and unravel even
It's
part of
it's
this.
daunting to think
I
about.
know it is very daunting, and I think this is why also a lot of people are complacent, because it's almost too big of a thing. Well, what can I do? I can't do anything. So
Well, their brain isn't working. That's another thing too, and that's a whole podcast in itself. People's brains are not working functionally optimally because they don't have the right nutrition. Their brain isn't receiving the memo. So like their nervous system, most people are in a state of sympathetic overload. So they're hyper stressed, they're in fight, flight, freeze, they're in constant trauma responses. So people's brain is literally being subdued, and the only real way to free yourself from the quote unquote matrix is start making lifestyle choices right here and now from where you're at. You have to change what you eat. You have to change the quality of the water that you drink. You have to face your addictions. People that's a whole thing in of itself. That's why I'm so passionate about the addiction conversation, because if you really want to get to it, we have to deal with the elephant in our own room, which is whatever addictions that we have that we're using as coping mechanisms to numb, sedate, and tranquilize our emotional distress and our stress, and that is causing us to be complacent with whatever dynamics are in our life that are out of alignment with our soul and that are causing us to live a life of quiet desperation.
yeah, and unfortunately, the system, the matrix, is set up
That's
so
right.
that we can just be addicted.
That's right.
So is this something, I know you talk about a lot about addiction, and it's in your stuff, and something you're passionate about, as you just said. Is this something, are you passionate about that? Is that something you've been through yourself, or is it just something that you've observed so much in people?
Yeah, I have been through it. I've been through it in various cycles. I'm just coming out of a space where I feel like I've finally conquered some of those deeper addictive cycles or tendencies. I've been through it. I've been through the pornographic programming, the pornography addiction, the masturbation addiction, the sex addiction, the love addiction, the caffeine addiction, the tobacco nicotine addiction, the cannabis addiction, the MDMA addiction, the altered state addiction, the workaholism, the workout addiction. Like I've the blame, shame, and point fingers at the world addiction.
Yeah.
I've been through all of it. And I actually released a book in the summer of 2021 called The Addiction-Free Lifestyle. So it's a 400-page book on addiction and trauma. And I'm so passionate about it because I had to figure out that riddle for myself. It's not like I had any major addictions like alcohol or substance abuse.
Yeah.
But they were underneath the surface. And
I could probably relate to that myself. Yeah.
I think this is what most people deal with, is they have certain things that are just accumulating. Coffee, for example.
Yeah. Working, hustling.
That's right. Yeah, and the stress that is caused from it, the anxiousness that's caused from it, and somehow if you really sit with yourself, that something's out of alignment. Something is robbing you of your peace. And that's how that there's something that's crying for your attention, but then we use the external coping mechanisms to kind of just keep us going so we don't have to deal with that.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously there's so much relationship between the food, the addictions, getting stuck in that loop. And I think the food, what you consume, is such an important, and it's probably the easiest step, right? Because that gives you that awareness crosses all sorts of different boundaries, right? That crosses over into all aspects of your life. Because I think, what I think a lot of people have never ever felt good.
Totally.
Have never felt good, and they don't even know what
they don't even know what that feels like. Right, exactly.
And that blows my mind. And the reason I say that is because I've had experiences where, like, one of my things is, I've struggled with a lot of pain in my neck and back through from childhood. And of course, I know that, the root cause of that is emotional trauma, and, unraveling those things, and why my pain why my body is addicted to pain. And, there's all sorts of things to try to unravel there.
Right. Right.
But I think the people focus on the wrong places. Like, what's interesting is if you do scans or x-rays of me and my dad, we probably have the both similar conditions. But my lifestyle is completely different to his lifestyle, and he's been on painkillers for the last 30 years. And it's just not something that I would touch. And that's just been a choice. And then that is, I'm not trying to make myself sound better than anybody, but I am sure that my day-to-day experience is different to his. Of course, I'm
you
assuming,
can just see it on people, right?
Yeah.
You can just see people that have had a hard life. You can see it on their face. You can see it in their energy field, their body posture. You can see when somebody's weighed down by the gravity of life. And you can also see somebody when they're the levity of, like, their spirit. In Chinese medicine, they call that Shen expression. Like, their Shen is wide open and they have a smile on their face, or there's, like, just spirit in their eyes. And that doesn't happen by accident. And that's what people need to understand, is that, if you want freedom, you're going to earn it. If you want success, you're going to earn it. If you want health and vitality and loving relationships, you need to earn it. Nothing of value comes without earning it. And that's a really interesting thing, I think, that's happening, like, particularly in the men's movement. I think, like Andrew Tate, for example, is someone who's really bringing some really powerful, like, arrow-like messages to the masculine energy right now. And one of the things that he said that really, many things he said that really, like, hit me, someone was asking him on a podcast. He said, what's the quickest way to get 6-pack abs? And immediately he responded, he's like, why does it have to be quick? Why can't it be a struggle? Why do you want everything fast and easy? He's like, if it was easy, everybody would have it, and therefore it would not be valuable.
Yeah.
He said the whole point about having a 6-pack of abs is that it's rare.
Yeah. And this is one of the things you say in my looking online view. You're saying you can have it all, but why do very few people have it all? Seemingly,
right?
It's because it's not easy.
No, and so that's another thing. Like, you have to fall in love with the work.
Yeah.
So that's like, if you really want to just, like, understand the psychology of any of this, of, like, like, evolving as a human being or exiting from the matrix, you have to want it.
Yeah.
You have to want it to the point where there is no other option.
But the way people approach it is, I want to fix this. I want to fix this health condition. I want to fix my body. I want to fix my financial situation. I want to fix this. It's like, well, that's a life of moving from one fix to another fix to another fix, right? So talk more about this. You can have it all, and why do people not?
Yeah, it's like, you can have it all, but maybe not all at the same time.
Yeah.
It's a progressive thing. It's like you're building the blocks of your life like a puzzle. So your life is a puzzle, and so you have to focus on where you're at and what's most interesting to you in that moment and what is most necessary. So you have to create a foundation. And again, that for most people is going to start with their health, their nutrition, and in really devoting themselves to being a healthy human being. Because when you focus on health, it changes your consciousness. The quickest way to change your consciousness is not just by meditating and going to yoga. Yes, do that also. But when you clear out the gunk inside of here and you start getting on 32 ounces of green vegetable juice every day, your thoughts will change from acidic, negative thoughts to alkaline positive thoughts. Now, once you start doing that with like moving your body and doing things with your body, all of a sudden you become a powerful human. You feel more confident. You feel more energetic. Now you start to feel like, oh, well, then maybe I should do something with my life. Maybe there's more that I can do. So it's just piggybacking one thing at a time. I think people have to have more of a long view of their life.
Yeah.
And the reason why people are not able to think long term is because their dopamine system has been completely hijacked. And dopamine is the molecule that controls motivation. So when dopamine is secreted in the brain, it's usually in the anticipation of a future event. And so this is why it can be very addictive in the wrong case, because somebody, if their dopamine this is tied in with your reward and pleasure system. So if somebody's brain has been wired to associate pleasure as a reward, they're going to immediately gravitate towards things that provide immediate pleasure, but the brain is going to assume that that's actually the reward. So then it's like, why am I going to work for anything? Why am I going to do anything difficult if I can just have the reward?
If I can just open TikTok.
That's right. Yeah. It's so the brain actually becomes trained for short-term gratification, and trying to think long-term actually becomes it's exhausting. So that's a whole other element to this puzzle is learning about dopamine, and identifying the immediate gratification impulses, or just again the addictions that we gravitate towards, working through those and developing the ability to think long term. Because when you think long term, all of a sudden it's like going from immediate impulses of, okay, let me reach out for the coffee, let me reach out for the cigarette, let me reach out for the pornography, let me rub one out, these things that are detrimental to our long-term success, that don't seem detrimental in the moment.
Yeah.
But when you look in the mirror one day and you smoked a cigarette, it's like, oh, nothing changed. After a week, or maybe like after a year, all of a sudden you're like, oh wow. And after 10 years, somebody's like entire skin quality.
But you didn't notice the decline.
You didn't notice the gradual decline.
In the same way that you have to take that same theory, flip it on its head for a slow decline for positive results.
Yeah, the momentum, you have to build the momentum back up, and it's going to take longer in the beginning, but it's sustainable.
Yeah.
And it's actually more powerful than a negative force, but you're recircuiting the brain essentially. You're retraining the brain through neuroplasticity, through changing your patterns and behaviors, and you are going to feel pain, because that's also the pleasure sensation. It's chasing pleasure to avoid pain. So then that's part of the self-medication, is that, I don't want to feel pain. I don't want to feel discomfort. So I'm going to do something pleasurable to medicate the discomfort that I feel.
Yeah.
We have to override that. As functional adults, we have to override that adolescent, tendency to be pleasure seeking all the time.
Do you have some kind of spiritual practice that you have for yourself? Are there rituals that you have on a daily, weekly, monthly? Are you doing full moon ceremonies, or what are you doing?
I've done all the things. I've been part of the spiritual communities throughout the U.S. and different parts of the world, on and off, for almost 12 years, and so I've been exposed to everything. My spiritual practice right now is just embodying the qualities of the man that I want to be.
Yeah,
I've done yoga and meditation and martial arts and medicine ceremonies, and these are all tools that I put in my toolbox, but none of it in the dietary things. None of it I don't imbue power upon it as if it's like a religion or a god. I can meditate. I have meditation whenever I want. So I'm just like, before we did this, I just closed my eyes for a moment and just, it's something that I have access to. It's a tool, but my own self-actualization as a human being is my spiritual practice. Being in integrity with myself, my thoughts, my words, my actions, in trying to get those to become one thing and be
Yeah.
a good human being and be good at being a human being, that's my spiritual practice.
That's an interesting way of looking at it, a powerful way of looking at it, because I think it's the case, and it's not wrong that you have, spiritual practices or rituals or prayer,
Prayer. Yeah.
that can center us, but you're right, we put a lot of power in those, and that then becomes that's the reason why I'm like this. When if you can embody that into just how you operate, part of your life, to me, like that's how I try to remind myself. To me, all of that is mindfulness. It's mindfulness and awareness, and then having small little practices. Like every hour, I'll just bring myself back to center, just do a couple of breaths, and it's like so that I'm just constantly reminding myself just to be mindful of where I'm at, what's my surroundings, how am I, how am I being. You were talking before about the attitude, right? And I think to me, like what was occurring to me as you were saying that is like humility. Humility to me is like it's such a foundational thing because it gives you access to be curious. It gives you access to be empathetic. I think I try to just remind myself to always bring myself back to that.
Humility, that's it. That's the number one thing. You learn that a lot in relationships, especially. And and you're able to see through the lenses of the heart versus the lenses of the mind and the ego. And that's they say that's the longest journey is this, where the 6 inches between or whatever it is, the head to heart. That's the longest journey you'll ever take. And that's real. And so empathy, there's a lot to get into, but being able to see through the lens of the heart is always the way we want to go, because there's a more broad and more accurate perspective of any particular situation, especially if you're dealing with another human being, and getting out of our own story, getting out of our own way, right? And just being able to see things as they are.
Yeah. You've mentioned a couple of times about, masculinity, and we're talking about Andrew Tate before.
Thank God for that guy, by the way.
Yeah.
Jeez.
And the thing is, I don't think you have to agree with everything he says in the way that he says it. But my question is regarding that, because the thing that he's connecting, his audience is, young males, I'm assuming 17 to 25. And he's connecting with, I think, an innate part of these young men that feel something different. That, like, it doesn't matter whether you think he's right or you think he's wrong, he's connecting with the next generation in some way that resonates, I think, in a very natural way. He's awakening something that is already there that maybe they haven't seen for themselves because of, the way that they were raised, their family, their school.
And this liberal, leftist, falsely feminized culture.
Yeah. But talking about, the reason I'm bringing this up is because we're talking about, connecting with the heart. And many people would kind of look at Andrew Tate and the way that he speaks is, he's aggressive about his approach, which I kind of like as well. But many people would think, well, he's not in his heart, So how do you combine this conversation of a strong masculine presence, but being in your heart? Like, what does that look like to you, and how do we connect to that? So I think over the last 50 or 60 years, with feminist movement and all these different things, I'm not saying those things are wrong. I think it's actually part of our journeys
it's part of the journey
to learn to unlearn some things.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So how do we connect back to that? Because I think the way that masculinity and femininity is in the world right now is very confused. It's very confusing. And men don't know how to act. Boys don't know how to act. Women don't know how to act. So everybody's just lost, and then everybody blames each other, and that's the world that we live in. When I think if there was a way we could connect back to our strong masculinity, but in a way that it is in touch with the heart.
Yeah, totally.
Right? So I'm asking this question as a man. I can't speak for a woman, but the question is relevant for women as well.
Sure, right? Especially as women are dealing with men.
Exactly. So how do we connect back to that?
Well, I think Andrew actually is very connected to his heart. I've listened to a lot of his conversations. It's very different, the snapshots that you see versus the long form conversations. It's a very different energy. There's a lot more articulation when he talks about his father, his mother. He talks about the women in his life, his brother. Like, he talks about his passion for men's mental health. You feel his heart. So I just want to make that point, but it's a warrior's heart, and I understand that very well. I think that's why I resonate so much with it. It's like the heartbeat of a warrior that sees where the world is going and has to stand up, and so that resonates really deeply with me as well. And everyone's different. Everyone has a different temperament. Everyone has a different tonality. Everyone has a different energy. So some men are going to speak in a different cadence than others, and it doesn't mean one's more masculine than the other. I don't like that, the superficiality of that particular type of conversation. A lot of the men's movement is still kind of strangely in this beta state that's talking about being an alpha male, but still so obsessed about women to the point where everything is about women or getting women or picking up women or avoiding women altogether. It's still very beta behavior. None of it is about evolving as a man connected with God. And I think that's really what a true, Jesus Christ was the ultimate alpha male, if you really want to get down to it, because he was single-minded, anointed by his Father God. And he was on his mission. So I think when we talk about masculinity, we talk about men's development, and we talk about, I think mission and purpose is central to all men. And that's a whole long conversation in and of itself. The whole agenda is to demasculinate men by stripping them of purpose, stripping them of the energy to pursue a purpose, to have critical thinking, to connect them.
So they can be followers, not leaders.
Yeah, be followers, to disconnect them from their heart so they're in their head and being wishy-washy and indecisive and all these things. Yeah. I think ultimately the true journey of the man, the masculine, is to be committed to a higher power, to be accountable to a higher power, which in my lexicon is Father God. That's how I relate to it, right? It doesn't really matter what you call it. It is what it is. The only thing that matters is that you call it. Yeah. Right? You call it forth into your life. And a lot of men, I've been guilty of this, put our purpose into a woman because we truly love the woman with all of our heart, but fail to recognize that the woman is also just a human too, and that's not where we should place maybe our trust and confidence and our love into a woman. That's not where we place our purpose and our mission. It has to be a higher source of accountability so that me as a man, I am accountable. My behavior, my thoughts, my actions, my words are accountable to a higher purpose. And then a woman can come forth and support me and serve her purpose by supporting me and my mission, and we can do that together. Yeah. That would be the ideal situation.
Yeah, that's nice. We've been going for an hour and 20 minutes already.
We've talked about a lot of things.
Yeah, and look, we could keep going. I think there'll definitely be a round two at some point. Mm-hmm. But let's just share a little bit about you and how people can find you and what you do. Sure. So you work as a coach. You've got tell us about your programs and what you do.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I have different online courses. I have a holistic nutrition course. I have an herbalism course. I have a dopamine reset course. These are courses that I've developed over the course of years.
Yep.
So these are video-based courses that people can check out on my website, hhphealth.com.
We'll give people the links. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. And then people can look all those up, and they're plug and play.
Yeah. Is this for anybody or?
It's for anybody,
Yeah.
anyone that's interested in those topics. And then I work with private clients. So I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, like peak performers, people that are already developed a certain level of success or foundation in their life and are at a particular level where they can work with someone like me, who essentially I'm a peak performance coach that has such an interesting like pedigree for holistic variables.
Yeah.
Like a mastery of holistic health and nutrition, and then also be able to go into addiction and trauma and dopamine resetting, and then like relationship dynamics and spirituality and emotional intelligence and psychological development. Like these are all the things that I've sought to master for myself. And it just so happens these have become kind of like the things that I work with people on when I work in coaching programs.
Yeah.
So I work with people one-on-one and in different groups when I have those available. And and aside that, I have I have different things like a YouTube channel and podcast. And
Yeah, we'll make sure everybody's got the links. So head over to Instagram and YouTube and make sure you follow Ronnie. One last final question, and that is, if you had the one-time superpower of mental telepathy, and you could communicate one brief, powerful message with all of humanity, what would that message be?
Wow. You're not who you think you are. You're so much more than you think you are. And you're capable of so much more than you think you are. You're not just a human being, flesh and blood. You're actually an angel in human form that has infinite capacity for good in your own life, in the life of others, and in the collective. And we all have a deeply meaningful mission, and the meaning of life is to solve that riddle, to figure out what that riddle is for you, and then put all your energy, your life force, and your resources into that. And that's called a fulfilling life.
Yeah. That's a beautiful share, man. Thank you. I just want to what was occurring to me with that is I think everybody has their own unique path. There is a uniqueness that everybody has. And I think we're just so led to believe that we should follow the path of somebody else, or we should follow this path because that person says so. And I think so many people feel some kind of calling to do something which is unique. I mean, the way that the work that you do is it's unique in the sense of, all the different facets of what you do, but there's no other Ronnie Landis. So
True.
other people are going to connect with you the way that they're not going to connect with somebody else. And that's true for everybody.
True.
There is a space and there is a path for everybody. So whatever it is that you feel called to pursue, give yourself permission to pursue that.
Yeah.
That's what I'm hearing.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Discover who you are. Really lean into that and
give yourself permission to do that.
Totally.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. That's all I'm doing every single day.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Ronnie, thank you so much. Guys, go check out Ronnie. Follow him. We'll make sure people got the links. And if you got any follow-up questions, you want to get in touch with him, please do so. It's been awesome, man. It's been a blast. I don't know how long you're in Bali for, but I think there should be around two at some
I'm definitely
point.
here for a couple months. Would love to. We could go so much deeper into so many things. But this was awesome. Thank you.
Cheers. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. back down the rabbit hole.